Hey guys, my name is Wildkard and welcome back. Thank you for following my contents, I really do appreciate it. You know why you're here, I know why you're here. It's Tuesday, it's News Day. Let's see what's going on in the world of rugby. Now, last weekend has been a bit of a quiet weekend, but plenty of rugby was played. And the most important ones of the weekend? The qualifying rounds to the Rugby World Cup 2023 in North America. Well, I guess in the entire continent of America. So Uruguay actually defeated United States to qualify in their pool in the Rugby World Cup 2023. And United States, having lost to Uruguay after winning at home, is now kind of relegated to the, I guess, next pool down to qualify their opportunity for the opportunity to qualify for the Rugby World Cup. So basically, what happened was that Uruguay initially lost the US and then came back dominant victory over the weekend over the United States Eagles, and which means that Uruguay is now in Pool A with New Zealand and France and Italy and a to be determined African side in Pool A. Whilst America now drops down to an America 2 qualifier, which they have to play. They have to beat Chile to make themselves into the final. Chile, on the other hand, pull out a massive upset over Canada on the weekend. So they initially lost to Canada, and on the weekend they pulled out a massive win over Canada. So initially they lost to Canada in like the last minute with a penalty. I think it was 22-21 lost to Canada, and then on the weekend they beat Canada for the first time to a big win as well, which means that since Canada only beat Chile by 1 point and Chile beat Canada by 32-24, Chile has basically eliminated Canada from being able to qualify for the Rugby World Cup. Now Chile will go up against the United States to secure that America 2 qualifier position in Pool D. So yeah, quite a big turnaround for both teams, and America will be sweating out a little bit because they really wanted to. They have a lot of potential to be a great team, especially with their really excellent performance against England at Twickenham in July. So they really wanted to. Getting knocked down to so-called the next tier of qualifying pools is not really the ideal situation for the Americans to be, especially the Americans were in consideration. Is still currently in consideration with Australia to be the next hosting country for Rugby World Cup in 2027. And at the moment, according to the Sydney Morning Herald, so massive pinch of salt because it's Australian newspaper and could be biased. And basically, currently looking at that, Australia is very, very likely going to be hosting the Rugby World Cup in 2027. They're currently in the process of what's so-called opening up what's so-called targeted dialogue. Is something that I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I'm guessing it's where they go into the exact details of the hosting process of the Rugby World Cup. And when you start talking about the hosting little details, it's very likely that they're going to decide on you unless something catastrophically goes wrong. So it's very likely. So as you can see, the paper calls it a sure thing. And this is something, this targeted dialogue is something that happened before Brisbane secured the 2023 Olympic Games. Although the Olympic Committee is different from the Rugby World Cup Committee, but the same logic kind of holds that once a country enters the so-called targeted dialogue process, it's almost a sure thing. While the other contender for the Rugby World Cup 2027 is the United States. And currently the United States hasn't been performing well. Like they're on the verge of not being able to make to the 2023 World Cup following their loss to Uruguay. So for them to host 2027 might be a bit too short if they have failed to even qualify in 2023, right? So obviously if you're hosting the World Cup, you automatically get qualified, but it does not put them in a good spot in that sense that your national team couldn't even make into the World Cup. in 2023 and then you want them to host it in 2027. Although Rugby Australia, if they're smart, they will try to work something out with the Americans because it is a huge market for rugby, world rugby, and rugby in general. So it is the best interest for everyone. In fact, for everyone except for Australia for the Rugby World Cup to be played in America because it's such a huge market. It'll boost across the board much more, I guess, increased fan base for across the board and generate bigger revenue across the board for all nations. If it's hosted in Australia, it's sure you will make money, but its overall growth of the sport will be a little bit less. So the only country that's not going to benefit for this to be hosted in America, well, Australia will still be benefited, will have less benefit, is for it's Australia. It's the only country that gets this advantage for this a little bit for this to be hosted to America. But I think World Rugby should probably do the best they can to try to put a World Cup in America. The current proposal for them is to give them Australia 2027 and give America more time to prepare for potentially hosting it 2031. So it's still a little bit premature, it looks like, for America to hosting it, despite the fact that that could be one of the biggest, most profitable move for rugby to move towards, as we saw that Japan has saw a massive surge in popularity in rugby following the Rugby World Cup in Japan. If something like that happens for America, it could be just massive gains financially for World Rugby. And also, with that said, Dave Rennie could be potentially signed to coach the Wallabies all the way to 2027 Rugby World Cup. And that will be interesting because if Rennie does well in 2023, it could take us to a home World Cup, the 2027. That could secure the cup win for Australia in 2027, which would be really, really nice. And also just giving a coach 2 World Cup cycles to prepare is something that's also really nice as well. Big benefit to the coach. And also that the pandemic kind of like written off 2 years of Dave Rennie's tenure in Australia. So it's kind of unfair to judge his performance for the 2023 World Cup after being written off 2 years, essentially, almost 2 years as a head coach of the Wallabies. So there's the autumn tour or the spring tour is coming up for the Wallabies, All Blacks, and the Springboks. Very exciting stuff. We finally get to play the Northerners after almost 2 years being isolated away. So Japan is the first game for Australia that's coming up. And Japan has announced the squad for Australia. That's coming up in 2 weeks, actually, less than 2 weeks as recording of this video. And the biggest name in Japan is Himeno-san, the great number 8, who played for the Chiefs and got Rookie of the Year for Super Rugby. So, yeah, big man, big boy Himeno will be back in action. Someone I'm looking forward to see for the clash. Also for the Wallabies, bolstering their squad. They're courting another overseas trio added into the squad. Rory Arnold. What are they called? Yeah, Rory Arnold, Tulo Latu, and Will Skelton are also called into the squad for the Wallabies for the autumn/spring tour. This is something that they are talking about a little bit at the moment. So at the current stage, they've called back quite a few players who are technically under the Giteau's law and not qualified to play for the Wallabies. And they're basically saying that this adjustment to the law is just temporary. So they're not 100%. They're still committed to grow local talent and to reward talent playing locally in Australia. And the current exemptions is just an exemption. Yeah, so just that. We made this... the exemptions made this year were just that exemption. So this model, despite seeing a lot of success for the Wallabies, winning 4 times in a row for the first time ever in Rugby Championship, provided that, it's the scheduling did help a lot. But, beating the world champions back to back, quite impressive for the Wallabies as a result of being able to bring back some of the old experienced players from overseas. Circumventing the Giteau's law really showed that how much it could help with the Wallabies. But, it's one of the things where if you take too much out of that from the Rugby Australia, but if you keep taking too much out of the overseas players and not rewarding your home players, more people are going to leave, and you're not growing home talent, and that's just going to reduce the quality of Super Rugby also. So despite the success they saw in the Wallabies in last month or so, they still not committed to make that a permanent rule as of yet. And also, talking about the Wallabies squad, a few additions to the team. So that is quite interesting for me to see. You can go through the whole list yourself. But Isaiah Parisi, where is he? Isaiah Parisi, he played for the Waratahs, and he was by far the best player for the Waratahs. Well, Waratahs had a really shocking season in Super Rugby this year, and Parisi was the only one that was making line pass, making gangs, putting points on the board. It's just amazing, amazing player. So I am very, very excited to see him actually debut for the Wallabies. And that being said, yeah, it's very, very exciting times to see how that will go. So he was injured towards the end of the season with a broken wrist or broken arm, but he's back now. So that's something to look forward to. And also, Dave Rennie was appointed the head coach for the Barbarians following. So the Barbarians will play, I think, in November. And he's thinking about putting Jordan Patea in the Barbarian team. Whilst there was some talks with Quade Cooper as part of the Barbarians team, he's actually not in it because he has commitments to his Japanese club. So Quade, the Japanese players, Quade, Samu Kerevi, and I think there's one more player. But yeah, Quade, Samu Kerevi, and the Japanese players basically have to miss out some of their season in Japan to play for the spring tour. So they do need the blessings from the clubs to be able to play, basically. Speaking of which, the spring tour, so due to COVID restrictions, Samoa actually announced they are not going to be traveling to play these overseas for the spring tour due to the restrictions. I can understand for a small team, Islander team, it's very costly to stay in hotel rooms for extended many years, and these teams, they don't get paid the big shares. A stadium, they don't get the big shares of the of playing like England. They don't get the profit split. I'm not sure exactly how it goes, but apparently they don't get a huge cut. They don't get a big cut. Obviously the hosting nation gets the biggest chunk, but normally, like if New Zealand plays England, they also get a cut. I'm pretty sure like smaller teams, like Islander teams, they don't get if they get any at all, they don't really get that much of a cut from the TV revenues and stuff when they do play for England. So just financially, it might not be worth it for them. So Samoa has opted out. But Tonga, on the other hand, said they will be traveling to Europe to play in the spring tour. And that is despite, the head coach Toda Kefu was attacked at home with stabbing injuries. So he's going to be recovered to travel overseas. So yeah, it's quite a bit of a contrast for both teams. One opted not to go, and Tonga, all props to them, opted to go. I think Toda Kefu has done the right decision here because Tonga is a team that's been really struggling. They got absolutely dominated by the All Blacks, but they did lose to Samoa in the qualifying rounds for the Rugby World Cup. So yeah, I think Toda Kefu have done the right thing. The only way for your team to get better is to play. You got to have to go through some adversity. May not even make any money from this traveling, but at least you get players ready to go for the future, right? And also for the All Blacks, big comebacks for the All Blacks team. Richie Mccaw, Sam Whitelock, and Dan Coles all returned to play in the NPC tournament in New Zealand. And Richie Mccaw, despite being apparently subbed on the 57th minute, still couldn't win the game for his team. They lost 41 to 13. That's a huge flogging. They got flogged. Welcome back, captain of the All Blacks. Get flogged. But yeah, so he just needed a bit of, I guess, he hasn't played since, he didn't even play at all. I think he played maybe 1 or 2 rounds in Super Rugby and early on this year and got injured, and he's been out since pretty much 6 months or so now. So it's good for him to see a bit of action. And also Sam Whitelock and Dan Cole are also played a game on the weekend for a bit of warm-up, and all three players will be grouped up with the All Blacks in Australia for a bit of training camp in the Gold Coast before heading off overseas to play America on the 23rd. Yeah, so that's the thing. Richie Mccaw is back in charge. Look at him. Anyway, the Springboks, let's have a look at some Springboks. So Springboks have a little bit of a setback. There's a couple injuries in the team that the players are going to be missing out on the sprint tour. So Frans Malherbe is injured from, I think, a couple weeks ago now, playing the All Blacks. I think he got injured. And also Nicholas Jan Rensburg also injured from playing in his top 14 match for Montpellier. So both of these guys are out. But I did think that Malherbe, it's not really, I don't think these two guys are that big of a piece of a puzzle for the Springboks. Anyway, Frans Malherbe, he didn't even play it when Springboks beat the All Blacks in the third test. And Frans Malherbe, I thought he hasn't been delivering. He hasn't been in form. So, not saying that injury is a good thing, but I think the Springboks will be fine. And Marco van Staden, who was injured against Australia, is it against Australia or against the All Blacks in the first test, will be back for the South Africa, for the Springboks. So South Africa is scheduled to play Wales, Scotland, and England in November. So that's the targets for the sprint tour. And some massive issue going forward for Snyman. So Snyman, I think he was injured. RG Snyman, I think he was injured from a fire pit incident with Damien Delende. So he was hurt pretty badly from my memory. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he's now, when he's recovered from the burns, I'm guessing, and he started playing again for Munster. And he's got a ACL. So only 26 years of age. And he's got a RG Snyman, I think, he had a fire incident, so he got burned. So that's why he couldn't play for the Springboks in the Rugby Championship this year. And burns. And so now he is not going to be able to play again, as he is got an ACL injury, I think he says somewhere. What happened to him? I don't know what that is. I think it's the ACL. But he's injured again. Re-ruptured his cruciate ligament. I don't actually know what this is. But anyway, he's injured again. And he's going to be out for longer. And then for some more news for the sprint tour. So apparently, 21 key Wales players are not going to be available for the All Blacks game, as the clubs have the first dibs on these players. I thought this is really, really strange, because the national team should be prioritized over clubs. I don't care how much money you make in clubs. Rugby is not football. It's not soccer. If this is a soccer, I can understand, because this, in soccer, the clubs get paid more and, get paid more money, and they technically get better teams than national teams. But the way rugby works is everything funnels up to the national team, and the national team is the most important team. And for you to not have 21 players available for the All Blacks game against, the premier team in the world, the All Blacks, is really not acceptable in my opinion. So the story basically says players such as Dan Biggar, Falatau, Rhys Zammit, these are not going to be able to play. They're not going to be able to play. There are some players that's been injured, but these guys are also not able to. Callum Sheedy, Lloyd. I don't know who this guy is actually. Nick Tompkins, and basically these guys are not going to be. Yeah, not going to be able to play because the club commitments. I don't want to go through the whole name list, but who were able to play is that the key man Alan Wynne-Jones is available, Adam Beard and Wynne Jones and Ken Owens. So they keep Alan Wynne-Jones, the captain, will be available, but still, man, like, how could you have club priorities over national priorities? I mean, especially if you're playing for a club overseas, I can understand because they don't care about your national team. If the clubs are, technically your, domestic comp, I don't know how you could prioritize that over the national teams, because it's just really, really stupid. And it doesn't, like, the fact that your player will get a bigger profile and bigger, recognition from playing the national team. So it's actually going to trickle down to getting more viewers for your club games. As if Reece Zammit scores a try against the All Blacks, surely you're going to get a lot of people watching your club games just to see Reece Zammit play for you. Whereas if he never gets the opportunity, then even if you have him in the long run, you're going to be suffering from having fewer viewers, right? It's just stupid. And also, just the overall profile recognition for playing the national team is just wasted. Just stupid from the Welsh. So our favorite man on the internet, Jaco Johan, his hearing date for his 62-minute YouTube video has been determined. It's going to be on the weekend of 30 to 31st of October. So Jaco Johan wanted this hearing to be public and has been denied request for this hearing to be public. So Jaco Johan wanted to defend the fact that the video was never supposed to be public, amongst other defense, and it's expected to. So basically, the World Rugby expected to come down on Jaco Johan really hard on this to try to make sure that the referees are not being targeted by the coaches on and off the field. That makes the whole work environment quite toxic, and the whole, it's not really in the best spirit of the game. So he's being considered a breach of World Rugby Regulation 18, misconduct and code of conduct. So there's a disciplinary panel. So the people in the disciplinary panel was announced here as well. So the Christopher Quinlan will be chair of the hearing alongside Nigel Hampton and Mike Mika of New Zealand. So there you go. 2 Kiwis will be there to determine your life, Jaco Johan. Anyway, so South Africa is starting to open up again for fans. There's basically a football game being played that's starting to allow fans back in Johannesburg. And despite this decision being made, it's a bit late for the South African teams to kind of move back to play a lot of the premiership games back at home. At the moment, all the South African teams are based in neutral grounds around Italy and Scotland and Ireland. And so they're all based around neutral stadiums in Europe. So they're not going to be traveling back despite the opening of the stadiums in South Africa. And also I think this is a bit of fake news at this point now. So there's still more talks about Lewis Liner potentially debuting for England and not being able to play for the Wallabies. I have watched some of his highlights he plays for the Harlequins, and he's a good finisher. So he's really, really good at running the ball, really fast and agile. But the rugby world today, especially at international rugby level, it really comes down to how good you can catch high balls, how good your kicking game is, and that's more important than your ability to score tries. To be fair, in international rugby, that is more important. You have players on the wing, sure, if you're good at scoring tries, but as a winger, having against international defense, you're not going to be... it's good, but it's not going to be the most important, as pretty much every winger can score tries if your team sets you up for it, right? The more important part is your kicking game, and how you carry out your kicking game could really cost your team in the long run, sort of. Like, it really costs your team if you're not able to handle it properly. But anyway, that he's very talented, regardless. And he's currently named in the England squad, so he could potentially get a debut against Tonga. And if he does debut, then he can't play for Australia. But I mean, this is decided. He wants to play for England. Eddie Jones didn't just pick him if he says he doesn't want to play for England. It's just a bit of fake news at this point. I mean, and also, just because his dad used to be a great Wallaby player does not mean he just get handed a jersey, right? He still have to prove himself, still have to be tested, still have to, be good enough to wear the jersey, right? You can't just hand it to him because his dad used to be. So I thought this is just a bit fake news at this point, that media is still pushing this narrative that, Eddie Jones is trying to sever him from his dream of playing for the Wallabies, sort of thing. Anyway, but his younger brother Tom Liner is in Brisbane and is contracted under the Reds, who will be playing potentially for the Wallabies one day. So he's actually in the paths up for the Wallabies. And with regards to Louis Liner, it'll be good if Louis Liner plays for England, and one day he has to play against his brother in the Wallabies. Okay, so that'll be a good match to watch, Brothers against brother on the same field, two sides for the Rugby World Cup or something, right? Maybe not for the Rugby World Cup, because who wants England to be in Rugby World Cup finals again? Maybe for like the quarterfinals or something, to see which team gets eliminated. Brothers versus brother. That will make a good show, actually. So, I think it's not... still... I don't think either players should be handed a jersey just because their dad used to be, but we shall see how that pans out. And lastly and finally, this is getting quite long. Christian Lealiifano, he is signing with Moana Pacifika, which is going to be playing in the Super Rugby next year. He's coming towards the end of his career, and to finish off his career helping out a developing team like Moana Pacifika is very, very good for the sport, for rugby, for Super Rugby, for everybody, for the fans. Now, thank you for watching my videos, guys. I really do appreciate it. We've got another bit of break this weekend, and then next weekend, it's full on spring tour. All Blacks versus United States, Australia versus Japan. We shall talk about that when it comes time next week. Thank you for watching, guys. If you like to buy me a coffee, hit the join button. Otherwise, post a comment. Let me know what you think about the news this week. I read all the comments. Thank you for watching. Cheers.